Welcome to episode 37 of the Animorphs Read Along broadcast. Today we are talking about book 32, The Separation. So in this book, Rachel morphs to a starfish, the starfish gets cut in half, and suddenly two Rachels. The two Rachels are like the two opposite halves. One half is her confidence, her rage, her bravery, her courage. The other side is her insecurity, her doubt. It's a neat idea, but honestly, lousy execution. This is probably one of the worst books of the series. And it's a shame because this is the first main series book written directly by Applegate since book 26. But honestly, most of the time I was reading this book, I was just waiting for it to be over. Obviously, it's a nice lesson that is learned here. Rachel has these two warring sides of her, and that they're both crucial for balance and for creating a stable human being. And this idea that mean Rachel has been growing stronger and wimp Rachel has been sort of growing weaker in recent books. I mean, it's like good material in theory. Both Rachels were super annoying. Especially nice Rachel with her excessive use of like. Bright spots in this book were the few Marco moments, Tobias, Cassie. The other characters, had some moments where I would chuckle or be like, oh, Tobias. But the actual Rachel parts were just kind of mind-numbing. I think this might be partially because the two Rachels were too extreme. And maybe that's intentional. Rachel is a person of extremes. Something more like Buffy the Vampire Slayer when Xander got split in two, where there were these two versions of Xander, and it took you a minute to realize that something was off. They were slightly exaggerated versions of him. These two people are totally helpless, useless. You have the psychopath and the 2-year-old. There was no subtlety in the way that these Rachels were created. So yeah, maybe all of that was by design. And I do think that looking at Rachel and the two sides of her is interesting, but I don't know, it just really didn't work for me in this book. Not to mention that the whole premise of is this even plausible, and then getting them back together. Everything about this book kind of requires some hardcore suspension of disbelief. But I'm usually okay with that if there's a good story to go along with it, but there was actually only really one moment of I thought, great Rachel insight, and it was maybe somewhat ironically in the first chapter before the split happens, and she says, "I moved steadily away from the others. No one cared. They're glad to see me move on. They don't know why they're relieved when I'm gone, but they are." So we see Rachel, beautiful supermodel, formerly popular Rachel, wandering off alone on a field trip, thinking that people don't like having her around because they can somehow sense, the bad vibes, I think is how she describes it. And that, for me, is one of the most telling moments in this whole book, and it's much more intriguing and interesting than the whole very on-the-nose, Rachel split. Rachel the loner, Rachel who doesn't like people, Rachel who thinks people don't like her. I'm interested in that character. And so thank God we got her back at the end of this book. This idea of an anti-morphing ray, while a little bit cartoonish, has the potential to be quite problematic. I can't remember if this comes back in the future or if it was just a one-off, but that could be quite a threat to them. I did like the part where nice Rachel was wondering if this had happened to Jake or Axe, would they have had this mean person come out? And she's like, yeah, Jake has darkness in him, Axe has darkness in him too. And then she thinks about Tobias and she's like, if this happened to Tobias, it would be exactly what he is, the human and the hawk. And I had actually been thinking about this before I got to this part. I was like, what would it be like for the other characters? And yeah, Tobias is already so divided. And so I liked the way this book ended with Rachel wanting to spend some time with Tobias, and he's like, yeah, okay, Rachel, the two of me and the two of you. That was sweet. So yeah, I guess this book allows us to see especially the vulnerable side of Rachel that we don't see very often at all. But mostly I'm just glad this book is over. I did not like it. I did not enjoy reading it, and I don't say that about that many Animorph books, but there you have it. I do, however, remember loving this book when I was a kid. For whatever reason. I think I loved the idea of Rachel forced to put the two sides of herself out in the open and really acknowledge what's going on inside of her. I don't think I've ever slammed a book this hard in these videos, and I feel kind of bad about it. But those are all my thoughts about Animorphs number 32, The Separation. The next book is book number 33, The Illusion. If you want to keep up with this read along, subscribe to this channel or follow me on Twitter, and I will see you on Monday.